Food Production and Outdoor Resources will come to order. Anna, would you please call the roll?
Senators Bean.
Here.
Berger.
Here.
Bernskoetter. Crawford. Here. Gregory. McCreary. Here. Washington.
We have a quorum. I'd ask you all to please silence your cell phones at this time if you have not already. For those here to testify, please speak into the microphone, introduce yourself, and address your comments to the committee members. Please keep your comments relative to the legislation. I do want to inform everybody in there that we have a hard stop at 3:15. We're going to have to be out of this room. So anyway, I believe that Representative Sharp, you're going to present House Bill 1298, so you're welcome to present.
These chairs are a little different from the House. Apologize. Okay. Good afternoon. State Representative Mark Sharp, for the record, District 37 in South Kansas City. Wanted to be here to present on behalf of House Bill 1298. This bill is sponsored by Representative Holly Jones, who couldn't be here this afternoon. I do chair the Special Committee on Urban Issues, where this bill did come through back in February, I believe. And what House Bill 1298 does is, one, this bill was heard in the Special Committee on Urban Issues. House Bill 1298 mandates cross-training for animal control officers to help them recognize signs of child abuse and child neglect. It also establishes a formal reporting mechanism for officers who identify potential child abuse or neglect while responding on their calls. So those are the main functions of the bill. This legislation is particularly important in places like Jackson County, where we see so many reports of pet or animal abuse, and we see these officers now are not mandated to report any child abuse that they may see along the way. So what this bill would do is mandate that and creates that mechanism for reporting for those animal control officers back to the Department of Public Safety. So this adds a pretty crucial layer to protecting Missouri's most vulnerable children and environments that may be unsafe. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and yield to any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Representative Sharp. Any questions for Representative Sharp? Senator Crawford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know this kind of got dumped in your lap. So it seems to me like people that would report animal abuse and people that would report child abuse are two very different people. And I think the limited training that they're going to get would be not near enough on both ways. It doesn't matter if it's which way you're going.
Sure.
I think you would need a whole lot more training than that, and so I would not be supportive of this legislation because of that. Like I said, I know this kind of got dumped in your lap,
Sure.
so I just kind of wanted to make that. What are your thoughts on that? I guess I need to turn it into a question.
Well, yeah, sure. And I appreciate that, Senator. When this bill was first heard in the Special Committee on Urban Issues, I thought to myself maybe 6 hours might not be enough. But I do think when we're in a position to at least move the needle somewhat, I think we should. And if I can, Mr. Chair, just respond a little further. We had folks testifying in favor of this from the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office because they've had instances where this reporting mechanism could have helped identify earlier situations where there was child abuse. So I think, even though the training could be more robust, and maybe we can change that or add layers to that next session, but I do think this is an opportunity to at least move the needle forward and try to capture some of those vulnerable lives that could be in danger.
Thank you. Any further questions for the representative? Seeing none, anybody here to testify in favor of House Bill 1298, would you please come forward? You can stay right there. If you don't care, you could sit over here at this microphone. You just need to turn the microphone on, make sure the green light is there.
All right. Okay. And got my form. All right. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ashlyn McCarthy Sinclair, and I am here on behalf of the Missouri Alliance for Animal Legislation. However, I've spent much of my career working on behalf of abused and neglected children in roles such as adoption social worker, in-home support counselor, medical social worker, and a house parent in a group home for adolescents. And to this day, I am a Jefferson County CASA. I'd like to start by reminding the committee that this bill passed the House 143-4. According to the Missouri Child Fatality Review Program, in 2023, 26 Missouri children died from inflicted injury at the hands of a parent or a caregiver. This is the homicide number, and it doesn't include the enormous number of children who are abused and neglected but are not killed by a caregiver. So these are our most vulnerable Missourians. Teachers are the main mandated reporters here in Missouri, and we count on them to make countless reports to Children's Division. However, many of these kids aren't in school. And similarly, medical professionals who make a lot of these child abuse reports, they're great mandated reporters, but these kids are oftentimes not going to the doctor. They're not being seen by a medical professional. So our question is, what community agency is seeing these children? And the answer is it's animal control officers. Nearly 80% of domestically violent homes have one or more pets. Oftentimes, animal abuse or neglect is more public than child abuse or neglect. So what frequently happens is an animal control officer goes out to a home to check on an animal that they're concerned about. In the course of their business, they see a child that they're concerned about, and then rather than just ignoring it, we'd like them to report that. Many animal control departments are understaffed. They go from call to call, and this would allow them to use an expedited service, which is our online reporting system, that they don't currently have access to. If we can make them mandated reporters for child abuse, which is something they've asked for, they'll be able to do this, and we will have so many more children saved from these terribly violent homes before it could be the end of their life. This bill fixes another problem. Children perceive their pets as special friends and family members, and watching a pet be tormented is extremely psychologically damaging for a child, even physically damaging, because we know what cortisol, the stress hormone, does to the body. So the pet may be the child's only example of a family member that loves and takes care of them and doesn't abuse them. So pets are extremely important, and if a child is in an abusive or violent home and they're removed from that abusive or violent home, but their pet is left, they're not going to heal. They're going to continue to experience trauma and concern. All sorts of different human service professionals are asking for this bill. Let's give it to them. They'll also have immunity from civil or criminal prosecution so long as they make a good faith report. You're going to hear opponents of this bill say that they would like law enforcement rather than the Missouri Animal Control Association to follow up on cruelty calls. I'm going to point out that the bill is written, has support from law enforcement, and MACA is expertly equipped to know what entity within the state can best handle cruelty calls across the state. You're also going to hear concerns about the training being too short. We don't expect that, when we have mandated reporters of child abuse, we don't expect that all these people are experts in identifying child abuse. We expect that they know enough to make a report, and then we let the experts take it from there. That's exactly why Missouri Animal Control Association is holding the line, because if people have an hour of training, that's enough to know whether or not they can suspect that an animal is being abused, and then they can make that report, turn it over to the experts. It just makes more sense for them to make that than ask for someone, a human service professional, to spend 6 hours becoming an expert in the field of animal abuse. Bills like this have already passed in Florida, Ohio, and West Virginia, and now it's Missouri's turn. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Since we've only got about 30 minutes, what I'm going to do is just alternate. So I would say whoever is not in favor of 1298, please come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony Duggar, registered lobbyist for the Missouri Pet Breeders Association, here to testify in opposition of this bill. I'm just going to hit on a couple of points and let the people behind me hit on other points. But the big point that I want to hit on here is the witness before me kept talking about pet, but pet is not in this bill. There's a definition of pet in statute, but the definition that they went with in this bill is animal. And if you look up animal, it's any living creature, domesticated or wild, who's not a Homo sapien. So we're talking about literally thousands of different animals. We're not talking about pets in this bill. We're talking about animals. That's one area that I think that this bill could be improved upon. I think that there is a solution to get through this bill, but there are some things that I think need to be addressed, and that would be one of them. The other one, of course, is the training time. We're talking about an hour of training here. It's just simply not enough. And if you look at the definition of training, it basically applies to new employees within their first 60 days of employment. It doesn't say training for everybody. I mean, it starts out in the paragraph saying training for everybody, but then it says within their first 60 days of employment. So I think that that could be read to mean also only new employees are going to get the training. And what if they don't take the training? There's no mechanism in here to deal with what if they do the training or don't do the training. There's no penalty if you don't do the training. So I think there's some areas. I think the idea of this bill is great, that we've got people looking for child abuse. I just think that there's some things in this bill that we could clean up to make this a better bill. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Senator McCreary?
So the data is overwhelming that people that abuse animals are very, very likely to also abuse children. And I think that if somebody's abusing like a deer or something that comes under the purview of the Department of Conservation, that also means there's something wrong with that person if they're abusing an animal. But I do hear what you're saying. You know, I would be happy to work on a better definition. One of the challenges is there was a court case in Ohio dealing with definition, so we're trying to strike the right balance with that. And then, of course, happy to look at additional training as well. I just think that the bill, the person that just presented the bill made a really good point in his intro, which is there are kids out there right now that fall through the cracks. They're being so abused that they can't go to school anymore because the adult or guardian knows that somebody will report it, and they're not taking them to the doctor either. So, you know, I think that I'm hoping that your organization and the people you represent would be willing to work with the bill sponsor to help figure out something, because I think there are truly kids' lives depending on us. Thanks.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of House Bill 1298.
Name's Cody Atkinson. I'm here on behalf of Humane World for Animals. I want to thank the sponsor and Representative Sharp here for being a co-sponsor of this bill. Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, Albert DeSalvo, Charles Manson, Albert Hamilton, the Uvalde school shooter, the Columbine school shooters, all of them documented history of abusing animals before turning themselves onto human victims. It did not matter whether it was a dog, a cat, wild animals. In the case of Albert DeSalvo, who murdered 13 people and raped over 100 women, who put wildlife into boxes and used them as target practice. This bill needs to be done this year. We can iron out some training issues in the future. That's fine. There are children out there who need this bill today. They need it last year. They needed it every year before that this has been introduced. We cannot and should not wait to implement more training, better reporting process for animal and child abuse. I just, a couple quick stats here. Animal Legal and Historical Center published that they found 100% of sexual homicide offenders abused animals. 48% of rapists and 30% of child molesters abused animals. It is a despicable, disgusting act that we need to get in front of. And when children are reported to be having abused animals, they need early intervention. And that's what this bill helps us with. It gets them into the psychological care they need. It gets them potentially out of abusive homes that is driving that abuse. It needs to be done. I understand that the training may not seem sufficient. We can, again, please let us do that next year. This needs to get done immediately. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Crawford?
It's just so you're more on the animal side based on who you work for, I would assume. I know you're passionate about the other two, and let me make this perfectly clear. I'm not in favor of anybody abusing animals or people or
Right.
children.
Absolutely.
Not at all. What would you say a sign of abuse for, let's say, a child would be?
It would be, not being an expert, I would say heavy bruising would be a pretty good indication, depending on where that bruising is. I mean, I grew up out in the country, and my knees were scraped constantly, and nobody would have called that abuse.
So what if you did have scraped knees and somebody came in and saw that and thought it was abuse?
I would imagine that there's a reporting process for that and some training that would be included on.
So do you think 1 hour's training is going to, obviously there are logical reasons why people could have scraped knees, just using your example. And then likewise, what would you say an example of animal abuse would be? A sign.
Yeah, severe emaciation would be a pretty good indicator.
In all cases?
Not in all cases, of course. I mean, an older animal, you have dairy cattle that are, have a heavier bone structure that you can see. So yeah.
Horses that have bad teeth. The list goes on and on. So I think I think it's important that people that would be required to do this have a lot of training, just based on just the back and forth that we've had, because there are examples. You may put people through this, put people through things that really were not founded at all. They were unfounded, I guess. And again, I'm totally opposed to abuse of all kinds, animals and people. I'm just trying to think through
Right.
what's that going to look like.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you for testimony.
you.
Next up, in opposition of House Bill 1298.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Karen Strange, President of Missouri Federation of Animal Owners. We would like to mirror what Senator Crawford said. We in no way approve of abuse of children, humans of any kind, animals of any kind. We have a couple things on this bill that we have concerns with. This defines animal, and we come to this from the animal side because we're the animal owners, so we have same concerns about humans, of course. But the animal welfare associations, by definition in this, is any group that registers as a 501c3 and continues on, and they are the ones, and the Department of Health and Senior Services shall develop or adapt and use available training materials for this. Our question is, why are we not using veterinarians to put together some of the information concerning the health and well-being of animals? That, to me, would be logical. And, of course, experts in human care for writing the regulations on that. But we think veterinarians would be good for that purpose. And it's also unclear what is done with the reporting after abuse is reported. It's to be reported to the Missouri Animal Control Association, and then what? In the state of Missouri, the investigators do not have policing authorities to enter without search warrants, and it's unclear, according to the legal counsel that we have worked with on this, it's unclear in this particular bill whether that would be granted or not. Lastly, this particular bill, similar, has passed in the state of Massachusetts. They had to go back in and change it because one thing they discovered was that people needing assistance were not allowing anyone, healthcare workers or anyone, into the homes because they were afraid their animals would be taken. So therefore, both suffered. So I think some cleanup language would help greatly, and we would be willing to work on that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank you.
testimony. Okay, next up, in support of House Bill 1298, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Claire Coughlin. I am with the Animal Welfare Institute, but I'm here to speak today as someone who also has a very extensive background in child welfare work as well. So, speaking in favor of HB 1298, As someone who has been a child welfare worker and has witnessed the relationship between child and animal abuse firsthand, and as someone who now specializes in this link between human and animal welfare issues, I'm here to support this bill and emphasize the important part that cross-reporting plays in the health and safety of vulnerable kids and families. In my time as a direct services provider for children who were either referred for the risk of neglect or abuse, or who had experienced child abuse or neglect, I saw firsthand how animal abuse and child abuse happen in the same homes. I saw parents who abused or neglected their children who had also done the same to animals in their home. And I witnessed how traumatic that pet abuse was for children whose animals were a source of comfort for them, or sometimes the only source of comfort for them in a really volatile environment. The bond between children and their animals is incredibly strong and can be used by abusers to control, manipulate, or punish them. And as an in-home worker, I did encounter animal abuse, and I saw the negative impact that it had on the kids in the home. But I hadn't been given the tools to address it. I hadn't been given the guidance that I needed. And in that particular, I remember going to my supervisor, someone who'd been a social worker for over 30 years, and even she was at a loss for what to do in that circumstance. So I would have given anything at that time as a young professional to have been trained specifically on this issue, to have been given training, to have been given guidance, whether that is 1 hour or 6 hours, to recognize and report when I was encountering these issues. This link is so prevalent in my time as a direct service provider that in my current professional position, I focus my time and energy on addressing this relationship between human and animal safety and welfare concerns. And in my work now with I'm constantly contacted by social services providers and advocates who are working with kids and who are traumatized by animal abuse and in need of resources. I also work with humane law enforcement and animal control professionals who are often in a position where they encounter child and elder abuse. Some of the most vulnerable victims of abuse are those older adults and those very young children who are not yet in school and don't have the safety net of teachers and service providers who are trained to recognize these signs of abuse and know what to do when they encounter them. For these especially vulnerable kids and elders, abuse is often happening behind closed doors, and members of the community, such as their neighbors, are not witnessing and are not reporting it. Alternatively, neighbors and community members are some of the most likely people to report animal abuse. They're frequently making reports when pets are left chained outside in freezing temperatures. They are frequently making reports when they see these pets in the backyard without food and access to water. So it's not a surprise that for these especially vulnerable kids and adults, an animal control officer may be the first person in a position to recognize abuse and to ask for help. Giving these animal control professionals and the training and tools they need to recognize and report child abuse and elder abuse may be the first critical step in identifying family violence, interrupting the cycle of violence, and safeguarding these kids. The sooner we can intervene in a violent household, we know that it is more likely that those interventions are going to succeed. And in my experience and in my opinion, the guidance and trainings outlined in this bill would give professionals the tools that they need to do that. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in opposition of House Bill 1298.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee. My name is Barb York. I am speaking on behalf of the Missouri Animal Husbandry Association. I also have nursing background. Not all abuse of children is physical. A very large portion of it is mental, and that creates a huge problem in your training. I only had Karen and Tony Duggar also spoke about some really good things. I just wanted to mention, in the House hearing when this bill was heard, witnesses testified that when they suspected animal abuse or neglect, they contacted law enforcement or animal control, depending if they had animal control in their area. They are doing this without it being mandatory. To me, as part of your job, you should be making the call. You should not have to have mandatory regulations. The other thing I have a concern about is, yes, I understand that abuse of humans and animals is not, I started to say permitted, but that's not the word I really want. However, when you're taking care of them and you're looking at the whole scene, if you know this already, it should be done. Once legislation passes and you pass a bill that needs more changes, we all know that it's very hard to change it when it needs to be changed. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Once again, we've got about 15 minutes here, and we're going to have a hard stop, and it's not because of, it's just we have to turn this room over. We'll make sure everybody aware of that, so if we can get our comments, try not to be redundant, that's all I ask. So next up, in favor of, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the Agricultural Committee. My name is Claire Wyatt, and I am a prosecutor at the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office at the downtown Kansas City office. And I, again, appreciate you hearing us out on this issue today. This is actually the second time I've made the drive down to Jeff City from Kansas City to speak on this important issue. So my work at the prosecutor's office involves a hybrid role of a violent crimes caseload, and I work in what's called the crime strategies unit, which looks at more policy and sort of the why, the root causes and the macro data of crime, as opposed to a snippet, which is typically a trial case. And since the first day on the job, I also have been handling the majority of our animal cruelty cases. And when I first learned about this link between abuse against animals and abuse against vulnerable humans, it seemed intuitive. I was not surprised. The data is striking, but still, that was not enough to prepare me for seeing this link manifest in almost every single animal cruelty case that has hit my desk in the little over 3 years I have been at the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. I have so many cases I could discuss. I'm going to limit it to just a few. One that stands out in my mind is a defendant that I charged with animal cruelty, the felony level, an E felony, which is the highest we can charge under Missouri law, for strangling and torturing a young kitten to death on video. And one of the most horrifying things about this video was that the background was strewn with children's toys and SpongeBob SquarePants, and the defendant was casually eating ice cream at the time. And the reason there were all these toys around is because this man lived with a 6-year-old son who had the day prior adopted that cat with the boy's mother. And this defendant was also facing some other charges at our office, including failing to register as a sex offender for sodomizing 3 teenage boys earlier in his life. So I will note that not even the public defender, not even a KCPD detective could finish watching the entirety of the video. The animal control officer and myself were the only ones that were able to finish watching it in its entirety, which we had to do several times to make sure that the charges were correct. And watching that kind of brutality over and over again does leave a mark. And in attempting to produce this as a trial case, I had to go do some investigation and talk to some of the neighbors of this woman who recorded the torture of her kitten on her in-home surveillance video. And what I learned is that she spiraled after this incident. I don't know what happened to her son, but she lost custody of him. And the neighbors said they suspected around the time that the kitten was strangled to death, the boy was being molested or abused in some fashion because he displayed some hallmark traits of that, such as bedwetting, regressive behaviors, declining in verbal skills, and that was their impression. But we'll never know. And there's a lot of things, that I kind of speculate in this work because these crimes are under-investigated and they are under-reported. But the data that we do have shows a striking link, and I can speak to my anecdotal experience of seeing this, again, in nearly every single case that has landed across my desk. And by the way, that he did end up taking a 3 out of 4 year guilty plea on that case. There was another defendant who I charged with a misdemeanor for animal neglect and cruelty for leaving a pit bull in her garage on one of the coldest weeks of the year in February of 2023. When animal control officers found the dog, she was frozen to the crate, adhered by her own urine and feces, and she couldn't move. She was probably within about 5 minutes of dying by the time they got her to the vet clinic. And what's interesting about that case is that defendant had another case pending in our other court in Independence for shooting at a group of 10-year-olds because they were bullying her. And in some of my own investigation and preparing for a sentencing hearing, I witnessed and listened to some jail calls and visits that made me strongly suspect that there was also severe emotional abuse, at the least, of this woman's children going on at the same time. And I'm going to skip over the final case because it's a striking example of violence against an animal manifesting into a murder against a human, but it was an adult human, so in the interest of time, I will not talk about that case. I did want to address one thing that I heard earlier before I wrap up, and that was from Mr. Duggar, that this bill refers to animals and not pets. I just wanted to clarify that the criminal charges under Missouri law have exemptions for garden pests, for livestock, for all sorts of other exemptions that basically would limit criminal charges to be around pets or an animal that somebody treated as a pet, was a member of the household. So I just wanted to make that clear and maybe suggest if there's some confusion on that issue to revisit Chapter 578, which are the most of the animal cruelty and neglect offenses in the state of Missouri. Finally, some raw data. Another office member and I went back and did a poll of cases charged in our office, again, the Jackson County, Missouri Prosecutor's Office between 2020 and 2025. 18 animal cases were charged. In total, I did a review just based on the data captured in our case management system. So I'm not looking at municipal court, I'm not looking at family court, I'm not looking at federal courts or other state courts. And of those 18 cases, I found a nexus to violence against a person or a vulnerable person in all but 3. So 15 of the 18 cases that had an animal abuse charged also had a nexus to violence against a vulnerable human. And so based on this overwhelming data that links the welfare of animals and elders to the welfare of children and elders to the welfare of the animals that they love, I respectfully ask that you would advance this bill through your committee. For all the victims that I've previously discussed and for countless unnamed and unknown victims here in the state of Missouri. Thank you very much for your time. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in opposition of House Bill 1298. Seeing none. Anybody here for informational purposes? Seeing none. Next up, in favor of House Bill 1298.
Richard McIntosh. I'm here on behalf of the Animal Legal Defense Legislative Fund. I've got nothing to add after that testimony.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Amy Putman. I'm a resident of Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm the education manager at Wayside Waves Animal Shelter in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm also a member of the Association of Professional Humane Educators, and I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 1298. I come from the human side and the animal side because I actually have worked in the field of education for 9 years, so 5 years as a middle school classroom teacher, 4 years on Wayside Waves Humane Education Department. The goal of humane education is to foster empathy, compassion, and respect for both humans and animals. One of my primary philosophies working in this field is that the health and safety of the people in our communities are interconnected with the health and safety of the animals in our communities. In an effort not to be super redundant, I am going to skip a little bit because we've talked about the link, we've talked about the research. As part of the violence prevention program that we teach at Wayside Waves, we work with students to develop the tools and language to identify what animal abuse and neglect looks like. As we do this, I've seen time and time again students who are realizing for the first time that what's happening in their home to them or people in their families or their animals is not okay. Throughout the years, I've heard stories of animals being thrown out of windows, kicked down the stairs, dents in walls left there from repeated instances of adults in the home banging the animal's head into it, children walking outside to discover their family dog had been hung from a tree in their backyard. Over and over again, students have told us about their animals being hurt, how they've tried to protect them, but they haven't told anyone until now because they were scared of what might happen to them. This past school year in an independent school, a student disclosed to our team that their mother, father, and brother had all taken turns shooting and killing their family dog, and she had listened to it happen from inside the house. She expressed that this was not the first time that a family dog had been killed by members of her family, but that had become her norm. Listening to your family shoot and kill your family dog is absolutely a form of trauma and abuse for that child. In these examples and many more I could share, these conversations started with or were about the treatment of animals in the home, but shed light on the treatment of humans as well. I share these stories not just to illustrate the connection between the forms of violence, which we've talked about, but also to point out an additional theme that we see to appear. In all of these scenarios and the countless others we see in schools, we find that teachers and school support staff who aren't aware of the connection between violence towards animals and violence towards people don't know the signs to look for and don't know who or how to report it. Early intervention on both the human and animal side is crucial to stopping the cycle of violence. This bill creates a path for early intervention that can protect both human and animal lives. It gives both those working to protect animals and those working to protect children the knowledge and the tools to work collaboratively to mitigate abuse and neglect in all of its forms earlier, more efficiently, ultimately creating healthier and safer communities throughout the state. I urge you to vote in favor of this bill and continue supporting policies designed to protect our most vulnerable populations. Thank you, and I'll take questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here else in favor of House Bill 1298?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Victoria Chicalero, and I am a member of the Child and Animal Neglect and Abuse Coalition, also known as CANA, and I am here in support of House Bill 1298. The Eastern and Western CANA coalitions in Missouri have representation from prosecutors, law enforcement, domestic violence services, humane educators, animal control officers, and child advocacy groups. The coalition meets monthly to discuss how the link works between us and how heavily present it is in our day-to-day job. This legislation recognizes the connection between violence against vulnerable people and animals, and is a bill the coalition heavily supports. Cross-reporting gets a lot of respect, especially from the Federal Bureau of Investigations, who are on the front line of community protection. The FBI's National Incident-Based Reporting System, also called NIBRS, helps law enforcement agencies recognize trends in crime to develop preventative strategies. The NIBRS started collecting animal abuse in 2016. Before then, it was just an other category. And since then, they have seen a noticeable overlap between animal abuse and crimes against people. The FBI has publicly endorsed the concept of the link between these vulnerable populations. They have stated, and I quote, "Animal cruelty is a better predictor of sexual abuse than a history of homicide, arson, or weapon convictions. Recognizing this link allows law enforcement to understand that animal cruelty may indicate other offenses occurring in the household." Other groups in support of cross-reporting and the link is the National Sheriff's Association, who is made up of law enforcement who report to the NIBRS system in their day-to-day operation. Also, the National District Attorneys Association, made up of attorneys who work closely with law enforcement and the FBI, also publicly states that animal abuse is a precursor crime to family and interpersonal violent crime. This bill mandates that animal control officers report suspected elder and child abuse, which could save an elder or child from years of abuse in the future, and even prevent the abuser from engaging in other crimes. And I did just want to bring up what our opposition has said. Of course, veterinarians would be consulted on the training. We would absolutely love that. Implementing cross-reporting will no doubt lead to safer communities, especially for the most vulnerable. Thank you for your time, and I will take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Anybody here else in favor of? Anybody in opposition? Anybody for informational purposes? Appreciate everybody being speedy in their comments. Representative, do you have any closing comments? All right, that will conclude the hearing on House Bill 1298. No further business coming for committee. I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.